You feeling better?
You are live.
All right, we're live. This is Senate Transportation. It's Wednesday, January 17th. We're talking about public transportation in general, and we're going to start off with our friend Ross McDonald. We all know, and he knows all us, so we're not going to do introductions. We're going to hand it off to you.
Well, thank you, Senators. It's nice to be in front of the committee again this year. We'll be introducing Jim Moulton as soon as I get connected. It somehow
It just kicked you out, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and so
I
we're
didn't
gonna-
do that.
that's good to know.
I'm not
But
kicking
we'll
you
get
out.
established pretty soon. This has been a report that follows up on 3 or 4 different reports on similar subjects, and so we're looking forward to hearing your perspective and sharing what the committee put through. It says I'm connecting. Oh. So State House disconnected.
Oh,
It must be your Wi-Fi.
Yeah, the State House public disconnected on us. Here we go.
Okay, there you are.
Got it. Okay, Jim, well, instead of redoing my background.
You got the presentation ready now.
I guess let us know.
There's some more over there. Feel free.
There's,
Grab his chair.
I'm good, I'm good. Thank you.
Just staying in the hallway.
Yeah, right. Preferred location.
Working.
Okay. So,
Which report are you going to be doing? Just the funding?
I got this up. We just need to share the screen.
Was Act 62 the T-bill, or what was that?
Yeah.
we never go by acts, but T-bill, budget, big bill,
Right.
B&A.
Alright. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Jim Moulton. I am the Executive Director of Tri-Valley Transit, which covers Addison, Orange, and Northern Windsor counties. And I'm also the chair of our Public Transportation Association, which is how I got elected to be part of this study.
And that's all the other.
Correct. It's basically the trade association for all the providers to come together and be colleagues and support each other. We also are the broker for the Medicaid contract services. So
How many are there? in the association? Okay, do you want us to introduce ourselves? Do you know who we are? We'll go around and do it.
thank you.
Senator Russ Siegel, Essex District.
Thank you.
I'm Andrew Persick, Washington County, Washington District.
Jane Kitchell, Caledonia, and
And
Newbury and Orange.
Right.
Yeah.
from Chittenden Southeast. See you again. So anyway, as you know, and as Ross mentioned, this particular report is about the non-federal match study. And we had, as you noted, this was Act 62, which is from the T-bill. I'm gonna actually do this because my eyes are. I'll get to the next slide. So the context and purpose of this was that
For 25 years, that's a quarter of a century.
We've been around for a long time. So yeah, it's this idea of local funding. I think I'll just review quickly that all the federal funds that come into the state, some flow directly to Chittenden County, the rest flow to V-Trans and then out to us as the regional providers. And those require non-federal funds to match them and draw them down. We've had lots of sources for those over the years, but as you know, the pressures of cost, expense of operating, labor, all that stuff is pushing us to find new sources. I have been around for 23 years, not 25, and have been involved in a lot of local match fundraising over the years. But from my perspective, effectively, we as transit providers have pretty much tapped out the sources that have been traditionally called upon, whether they are municipalities, whether they are hospitals, universities, employers, and local donors, human service agencies. We've really coming up against a bump in the availability of local funding. But we need to continue investing funds into transit in order to draw down those federal funds and make sure that we can at least sustain the services that we have on the road now. So the most recent studies, 2021 and 2015, and then as we noted, section 15 of Act 62 is for this study. So it's been building for some time, especially the sharp increase in labor costs, through COVID. Obviously, the labor market coming out of that has been really precipitously more expensive. As noted here, federal COVID relief funds, as we phrase here, pushed off the day of reckoning, but these funds are now being exhausted. I mean, COVID funds obviously were intended to provide relief for every sector of our daily lives, including transit. Ross and VTrans have done a fabulous job of extending the life of those funds, but they are on the verge of being exhausted in terms of supporting transit. We all know the needs around the state: aging in place, the opioid epidemic, other healthcare access, climate change, employment access. And one of the challenges that we face as transit, we're often assumed to be already in place to address all of these issues. We are not as ubiquitous as we probably should be and need to be, and that's primarily limited because of funding. Feel free to interrupt and ask any questions along the slides. So in the study, we had several key assumptions. One was that we assumed there would be no significant expansion of operations. Essentially, the service that's on the road today would be the service that's on the road next year and the year after. There have been increases in service and operations over the years, but again, for this particular study and looking at these next 3 years, FY 25, 26, and 27, we assumed level service. We also assumed that state funding, which is currently at $9.85 million in the proposed FY 25 budget, that would stay level funded. We wouldn't see a change in that. And we also assumed that the flexing of federal highway funds that Vermont has done for decades to assist public transit would not decrease from the $23.5 million in the state 25 budget as well.
You probably are assuming that the Medicaid dollars that help with the administrative costs are being maintained in your key assumptions.
Yes, that's well. So maintain there would be our primary mindset around the Medicaid contract is that it breaks even. So whatever the cost of those services are is offset. So there's no loss. But as you know, importantly, it does provide a tremendous amount of funding for the overhead.
I'm just saying, I think without that, then that would certainly make this
even stronger.
Even, yes.
Okay. We should probably put that in between now and the House this afternoon.
No, it's just,
no.
Yeah, because I don't know what it is at this point, about 15 million?
Yes, that's about right. Yep. So the bulk of that, of course, pays for the direct services, but as you note, Senator, a lot of it does go to offset our overhead.
The infrastructure.
Exactly. So I won't go through all the numbers here, but if you just look at we have federal and state operating funds, we have local funds, we have capital expense. The capital expense listed here is just from formula funds. It's not the true capital that we spend around the state. And then some additional urban formula funds. So in FY25, if those assumptions all stay the same, then we would project that around the state we can break even. No loss, no surplus. In FY26, we're looking at something north of a $1 million deficit, and then let's see my own slide here, closing in on $4 million by FY27. So this is coming, and it would have been here already absent the COVID relief funds. So obviously, none of us wanted to experience COVID, but the fact that the COVID funds were made available has allowed us to continue our operations, deal with the increased costs, stay solvent, stay safe and on the road, but those are running out. And then there will be no formula funds available for capital after FY25. Capital is obviously, we think of it primarily as replacement of our buses. They all have useful lives. They have a lot of buses around the state. What's the current number, Ross, around the state?
Buses?
Yeah,
424.
424 vehicles. So, and they're not cheap. So, if they have an average of a 7-year lifespan, that's 60 buses a year around the state, at an average cost of, let's say, $200,000. We're talking a lot of dollars.
So on the, from formula funds.
Yes.
You're assuming none in 26, 27. Those are all federal? Formula funds?
Typically they come in 80% federal, then 10% state match, and we provide 10% locally. So again, pressure on the local match.
So this is only, okay.
There could be formula funds in the future.
And that would change the bottom
There
line.
could be.
Yeah,
There
I
could be,
guess
but
that's
we
what
have to
I'm
make,
saying.
and so capital is, we in the analysis, we include the local match for the capital funds, but we don't know what the capital formula funds might be. Vermont has been very successful at applying for competitive grants. We have Lono grants, we have, you name them, Ross.
5339 bus and bus
Right.
facility, the Lono, and then other opportunities that
Right.
are provided to
Right.
us through that TIA program.
And
So this is a conservative estimate, putting in the zeros.
correct. Correct.
It could be influenced in a positive way.
So from a formula fund perspective, yes, but that also then requires additional local funds, which puts that pressure even greater on this.
Yeah.
So the conservative, we've also looked at it from a perspective of, we're trying to estimate sort of the low end of what that local match
I
pressure
thought
is
you've got
gonna
the
be.
match right now for those formula funds in your base somewhere.
Correct, but that's only through FY25 because the pressure keeps going up and the cost of those vehicles keep going up. Vehicles which probably 2 years ago cost $120,000 each are now in the $160,000 range. So we're talking substantive percentage increases in those capital projects. There are also, I'll say, needs for additional revenue. There are things that we have looked at, the state has looked at, whether it's legislatively or in community health programs or in transit, mobility for all service for all rural areas. On the one hand, Vermont does a tremendous job of providing public transportation at a better rate than a lot of other states do outside of their urban areas. But there is still a tremendous demand for our demand response programs. The O&D program for older and disabled Vermonters, Medicaid, RJA is for regional job access. So there are opportunities to expand transit access for all Vermonters.
But that expansion is going to be contingent on.
Correct. It's all contingent on funding. So this slide is intended to show sort of what additional pressures could be in terms of policy, but they are not. We have not included them in the dollar pressure on the local match right now. There's a need to reinvigorate urban service, and we talked about the capital investment. So one of the issues that happened through COVID for a lot of industries, of course, was supply chain issues. We were really hit hard by that as well. I'll say for Tri-Valley Transit alone, we are trying to deal with 2.5 years worth of capital bus replacement in this fiscal year alone. We have done a good job locally of raising our funds. V-Trans has done a good job of carrying those pass funds forward, but the cost of capital today is different than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Fleet electrification remains a state priority in terms of policy, but electric vehicles are more expensive. So, and as I noted a little earlier, I will say Ross V-Trans have been very aggressive in their pursuit of competitive federal grants, and I'm pretty sure we've gotten federal competitive grants every year. But it's a competitive grant. There's no guarantees, and the priorities around the state can shift. There is, for example, a large urban facility project, or not urban, but facility project for the Barrie, Montpelier area that is going to be a lot of, that'll take a lot of competitive funds. So in the study, we looked at a lot of potential new funding sources, 14 total. 8 had some connection to transportation, 6 were related to other sectors. The details of that are contained in the report. We went through the evaluation process, and to facilitate comparison, we looked at rates or fees that would generate $3 million in each one. So, we were trying to create an apples to apples comparison. So if we said it's 40 cents on one thing or it's $5 on another, they both were to generate $3 million in the end. So we looked at the options and tried to base them, the committee, each individual evaluated based on equity, stability, administrative cost, administrative burden, meaning the ease of implementing it, acceptability, and the connection to public transportation. And we looked at both weighted and unweighted scores. Surprisingly, there wasn't very much difference between whether we said this is a particularly important, a higher rated one. We looked at equity in particular, saying we want to make sure that we are being as fair and reasonable as we can across the state. But in the end, the same options tended to rise to the top in some area.
So you're looking just to cover the $3 million shortfall you laid out previously, not to supplant all existing current funding sources.
Correct. No, we believe actually that it's really, really important. There's been a tremendous amount of work, relationship building with all of the local funding sources now. It's a way to, everybody has some skin in the game. Universities are getting benefits out of it, whether it's employees or students. Hospitals obviously are getting patients brought to them. All of those things. So of the 14, we landed on these as the top 4. Vehicle registration fee, obviously there's a connection in transportation there. The average cost right now is $91. If we add $5 to that, that would generate the $3 million. In the conversation, the concept of an ad valorem, changing it to an ad valorem fee came up.
Can you give us the lesson in Latin?
Sure. Effectively, it's go ahead.
Yeah, it's personal property.
Yeah. So if you have a used vehicle that's worth $1,000, your registration fee is just a percentage of that 1,000. If you have a $10,000 vehicle, you can pay 10 times as much. So the idea.
You drive a Mustang, you did pretty hard.
I'd do well.
Yeah. As you always do.
The assumption by an ad valorem fee is that if you have a more expensive vehicle, you have more ability to pay for a higher registration. It's an idea that came up in conversation. So
it isn't already based on?
No, it's a flat.
Just the purchase and use.
Correct. But the registration fee.
So you offer a retail delivery fee comparison to Colorado, Minnesota.
You love fees, don't you?
But you don't offer.
Hang on.
I love how these are fees, aren't they?
Hang on.
There are no tax. Oh, there's one tax.
Rental car tax, is that a sales tax?
You don't offer comparable states for the vehicle registration fee. In your discussions and the review, is there comparable states that have a ad valorem fee on the car registration fee for public transportation?
That's an excellent question. I don't know the answer. I don't know, Steve, if you,
Well, almost every state has some sort of registration fee. Plenty of states have excise taxes, which are related to the value of the vehicle.
Could you identify yourself?
Sorry, I'm Stephen Falble from Steadman Hill Consulting, and I was the primary consultant for the study.
sorry.
So yeah, we didn't do a detailed inventory of who has what kind of fee.
Right. So segueing into the retail delivery fee, I think we cited Colorado, Minnesota, trying to think, are there any states out there doing this? And these are the only two that we could find at the moment. But they are adding fees to deliveries, Amazon, primarily, let's just say, obviously UPS, FedEx, everybody else. But the idea that people are now having more and more goods delivered directly to their doorsteps rather than going out and purchasing them. And that puts more commercial vehicles on the road, which hypothetically creates more wear and tear. And therefore, it might be an opportunity to. Yeah, it's we looked at 14 different ideas. We wanted to look at every idea that the committee could come up with, just to say that we've looked at everything. We didn't want to rule anything out. If it was to be initiated at 40 cents per transaction of $100 or more, so looking at it, the Colorado and Minnesota look at it and say, if it's under $100, we're not going to put a fee on it. But if it's over
40 cents, the customer then,
Ultimately.
where you got the.
ultimately the customer will end up paying it because the delivery companies will pass it on. But
The transaction is the cost in charge of the delivery itself.
yes,
So how many FedEx deliveries?
this assumed 12 per household per year.
That'll get you 3 million. And expected growth rate of that.
I don't,
Not
the
sure.
transaction, can you, I'm not sure I understand which transaction.
Delivery.
Well, my point is, most deliveries don't cost $100. That's a
Yeah.
fairly expensive
It's the price of
delivery.
the goods, not the delivery.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Ah,
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, all right. I'm down to rental car.
Okay.
Is that a sales tax?
Like an assessment, I think.
I'm just wondering, we have a rental car tax now.
Correct, and this would just be increasing it.
Is it a sales tax?
It's not, I guess, for me, a sale is something tangible passes, whereas this is a rental, it's a temporary transaction.
I'm just wondering where the revenues go. If a sales tax goes into the ed fund, that's why I'm asking.
Goes to the T-fund,
This goes to the T fund?
The current rental goes to the T.
9% current level, and it goes to the T-fund.
Okay, all right, I just couldn't remember,
Okay.
The nature of the tax.
Do you know how the 9% compares to neighboring states?
No, I don't know that off the top of my head, sorry.
So we should follow up on these questions to get back. They're relevant.
It's gonna compare yourselves to the Joneses.
And then a utility fee. I know this has been talked about in legislative sessions previously, recognizing the growing share of electricity as a motor vehicle fuel. And if it were to start at 40 cents as a monthly fee per residential customer and $2 per commercial customer, that would generate the $3 million.
But that's for everybody, regardless of whether they have.
Correct. An electric vehicle or not, correct.
That would be popular one to us.
Yeah, I don't think any of those are very popular. I'm just saying, that's
Well,
actually
from our
wondering-
committee's perspective, these were the four most
Yeah,
popular.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And can you, and I don't know if Ross, you're gonna talk about this, but I don't remember talking about this last year. Was it asked from the agency to do this study, or where did this request?
So usually we ask for a study when we.
Well, we ultimately do, but I didn't, if it came up, bubbled up from where?
From testimony, Senator, where we talked about some of the headwinds and that it'd be prudent to probably look out a few years and see where we are with our existing funding model. And of course, this relates to the overall pressures on the T funds. And so this is the transit organization trying to elicit their ideas on continuing their services.
And did the agency participate in this?
Yes, I was on the committee. But this is a BPTA and Stedman Hill document.
So in the end, it was a result of testimony the legislature requested the study. It didn't come from, which I would certainly not have expected it would have when you're dealing with anything like this.
Okay. Anything else?
So our hopes and dreams would be that the legislature is able to set a policy in this session for what might be the source of potential increased local funds. I know this is in statute as far as it relates to transit, and I know conceptually it's in place for most of our programs, including Medicaid, where the goal is to maximize federal funding. And that is the problem that we're coming up against, is that there are future expectations of growth in federal transit funds, but our ability to draw those down will absolutely be limited by our ability to keep bringing new non-federal revenue to the table. As we know, transit agencies will start setting our 26 budgets later this fall and through the next fiscal year. And understanding whether there is a new source or not will be critical to how those budgets get set. So if this committee, if the full Senate, full legislature were able to say, we're going to select a particular new funding source and implement it at the beginning of FY26, then we would be able to be as planful as possible. Some other ideas that came up, in the conversations that the committee had, obviously the sustainability of the T fund is an ongoing concern for everybody. And one thought we also had was that any potential new source of funding could also potentially be linked to the State Aid for Town Highway program, which might also allow the municipalities to look at increasing their investments in transit as part of a local match. So sort of a way to incentivize at multiple levels. And that's that.
Okay. Thank you for that overview. It's helpful. Any other questions? Ross, are you going to give a presentation, or are you just here to add color to this presentation?
Just here to be present and to see how the conversation goes, testimony, and we'll be presenting the NEMG rated service model at 10:30. And certainly defer to Michelle Boomauer for policy discussion.
And you were on the committee, but I assume the recommendations, the agency has been taking no position on the other four recommendations, or the four top recommendations.
At this time, that's likely, and we did pay for the study. We participated in the study. We thought that this outcome may be useful to the agency or to others as they try to look at different ways to address future revenue needs. But right now, our current funding has allowed, certainly on the rural side and in the report, you'll see the difference between urban and rural. On the rural side, which we're primarily responsible for, we're in a little bit better position, but facing many of the same headwinds that they face in the urban area. So that's where we are at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Have you done a presentation in the House Ways and obviously not the administration, but anything that has to do with fees?
So we're speaking at 1 o'clock with House Transportation on this. So that'll be our first introduction.
This assumes then if you remove these revenues, they would be dedicated to public transit as opposed to just going into the T fund and being considered, and building that whole AOT budget.
Right.
Because normally we don't, well, when you start, everybody would like to have a dedicated funding source, obviously. And so I don't know, do we have other, well, that's a question maybe for the fiscal folk, but in terms of any revenue stream that comes into the T fund that is dedicated toward a particular component of the transportation plan? I don't think so. And anyway, this is inherent in that discussion.
Since we have a little time, Ross, can you remind me of where we are with the vehicle miles traveled fee or tax or whatever we're calling that?
I'm not aware of the most recent discussions and status of those.
Probably Michelle would be the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need an update from Michelle on that?
My mind was going similarly, if we do start for electric vehicles at inspection, track how many miles, if there was a variable rate where they put more miles on over that year, they would pay a larger public transportation subsidization fee.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And then you get into an equity issue of people having to travel more to get to work because they live in a rural area versus.
I think we have that now with the gas tax.
To contribute to congestion, so they have to subsidize public.
Well, you don't get too comfortable because you're not.
It doesn't work in the Northeast Kingdom. It does in Chittenden County, but we don't have too much congestion over in
Get a little bit into this.
where?
All right,
Norton?
we're gonna move on. Clayton, you can, if you're after Ross, you're out of there.
Thank you, Senator Perchlik, for taking over leadership. One of my legislative priorities is always amusing Senator Mazza, so
I know,
I'm sad that he's not here.
No, he's not.
he was gonna zoom in, but maybe.
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to talk to you without a presentation. And I'm going to, Clayton Clark, General Manager for Green Mountain Transit, here to talk about the return to fares in our urban fare system. And Senator, would you like me just to dive in?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm going to walk you through the highlights of our return to fares, and hopefully be able to give you an opportunity to have ask questions and for me to do my best to answer. So I wanted to start by making sure that we have clarity on what is returning to fares. So GMT has both rural and urban routes, and it's the urban routes that are going to be returning to fares. So that is the local urban service in Chittenden County. That is the commuter routes that are coming to Chittenden County and ending in Chittenden County. And those are the link routes that are coming and ending in Chittenden County. And I want to emphasize that it's just the GMT routes. So we have commuter routes that Tri-Valley Transit operates that ends in Chittenden County, but the return to fares will not be impacting them. So this is just GMT, and it's just GMT urban.
And you've been giving us updates periodically.
Yes.
Yeah,
On your-
talked a lot about it last year.
Yes. And so I'm happy to not give you the dog and pony show if you want to jump straight to questions. So whatever you would find helpful.
Just give us a quick synopsis of where we are, when a fear's starting, what the issues with the money boxes or what, what's going on, what the timeline is.
Perfect. That's much more fun. So we'll be starting on March 6th, and which is a Wednesday. And the reason why we're starting in the middle of the week, in the middle of the month, is that we didn't want there to be any concerns that riders would have about the return to fares to interfere with them voting on town meeting day. And so the board was very much wanted to not have anyone not participate in the electoral process because of the return affairs. This is just over 2 months more than we were hoping to start. The good news is that most of the work has gone on schedule. There was one item that we were not able to get prior to January 2nd, and that is the smart cards that will allow our cash-based riders to be able to have the same most equitable and most cost-effective or payment protections that our other riders would be able to have.
What do you mean by that?
So we are going to have a system which will flip things so that instead of people having to pay up front to get our best pricing, that they will accumulate, we will keep track of how many rides they have and then stop charging them once they reach that point. Okay. And so in order for us to do that with folks who don't have a credit card or a bank account, they would need to give us cash, and then we would add that value to a smart card. And so we didn't want to have those folks having to pay a higher price just
Would the driver do that, or they would do that?
They would do that at the transit centers. They would also be able to go to.
It's like the installment plan.
What's that?
Almost like an installment plan.
Yeah.
Getting the credit for the payment, and then they get anything above that.
Exactly.
Is free.
Yes, and they would also have the ability to go anywhere that cash cards are sold, and would be able to purchase those cards and add them to their plan. So it is a small, barrier, and we only know that this is going to impact a small number of folks, but it's going to be our most vulnerable folks that would be impacted, and so that's why we wanted to wait.
Absent those cards, is it correct that your fare box is the new upgraded to anybody with just a credit card will use this bank card and it will accumulate and track this
What is the
card?
number on that?
Yes, let's make sure it's up in front of the camera.
Is that how it works?
They'll have to have an account with us, and so they'll be able to come in and pay with their credit card, but in order to have their price protections, they'll actually need to set up an account with us.
Get a card from you or use this card?
We expect, we know that about 90% of our riders have smartphones. And so that means that it will be simply downloading the GMT app, and their account will be set up within minutes.
Technology at work, huh?
Yes.
Will they be able to pay with the phone?
Yes. And so this system used in other locations, the majority of folks just bring their phone across the fare reader, and it's as simple as that. And but we still will be accepting cash. We still will be accepting if somebody doesn't want to create an account but is comfortable using a card. Our riders have many preferences that we want to try to be as open to as possible. So we will be standardizing our fares at $2. One of our goals was to make sure that the fare system was simpler than it was previously, when we had our commuter link and local routes all at different prices with all different monthly pass rates. And so the standard rate will be $2 per ride. The discounted rate will be $1 per ride. We know from our previous experience that about half of our riders are getting the discounted rate. And so that is why in previous testimony, we talked about exploring other discounts, but especially with our need to generate the 10% revenue, and knowing that we already had about 50% of riders receiving a discount, we didn't choose to expand that. Mm-hmm. And so for those riders, those are first off, children 5 and under with an adult ride free. 6 to 17 get a discount, 60 and over get a discount, and anyone who self-identifies as disabled gets a discount. And so for them, the folks receiving the discount, everything is half the full price, including the fare capping. So where somebody would essentially be able to have unlimited rides across our system for $50, if they were not discounted, it would be $25 for somebody who was One of the things that we really like about the Gen Fair system is that it's going to give us opportunities to continue to build on this. One of the things that we recognize is that the more we can have people other than riders pay for rides, the better that is. There's certain rules regarding how fares are considered with local match, where if we had an agreement with say a large employer, over a contribution for payment in lieu of fares, that it's handled a bit differently. And so one of the things that's allowed us to do is that we're working like with DEVA right now on supporting their Medicaid riders. We're working with the hospital, with the university, and we're going to be able to have much more successful partnerships there because of the system. And one of the things that's nice is that it will provide these organizations with much more control. So in the past, if an organization, say, provided their employees with a physical monthly pass, that employee could, give it to anybody that they wanted to give it to. With this system, it will be tied to an account. Now, granted, like a smart card, there still could be that abuse, but I'm guessing most people aren't going to be, logging in on other folks with their cell phone. And then more importantly, on the employer side, they're going to be able to see who is using it. And so, Johnny no longer works here. We're going to, stop subsidizing his fares, and they don't have to worry about continuing to provide that benefit to people who are no longer eligible.
And what was the dollar number that you were hoping to raise?
1.6 million is the 10% revenue target. And we initially proposed having a $40 fare cap. A very smart gentleman in the room that you heard from earlier, Stephen, did some cost analysis for us.
We generated.
Yeah, and we wouldn't generate it, so that's why we went to 50. Historically, we had the $50 monthly pass cost from 2005 to 2019, so I think it's still a good value from that perspective, although certainly the people that are paying it.
When you used to have fares, what were you generating around that same dollar amount?
I think that we were generating, it's fluctuated as far as the percentage, but I believe that, Steve, can I phone a friend?
The last full year, FY19, it was 2.2 million.
Yeah, so a little less.
A little less.
And you're doing, to get this right, but you're doing like a postage stamp type fare system. So it's $2 whether you're taking the link to Montpelier or you're just going down the block to the
Yes.
stop.
Yes. And we did, Stephen also did a study that indicated that we'd likely see about a 16% drop in ridership from the return to fares. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we're also, expecting the lower forecast. And when it comes to the link and commuter routes, we just have not seen them return to pre-pandemic levels. That's one of the reasons why we also thought that we wanted to lower the price for those to not create a disincentive further for their uses, because those routes are some of our most important when it comes to our stick factors because of the miles.
Right.
And so it's important for us to.
Do you know if it's commuters that aren't riding the bus, or there's just not as many commuters?
It appears that there's not as many commuters. It appears that the trend towards telework is definitely impacting the folks that would normally be traveling up to Chittenden County on the link and vice versa down there.
Do you have any any segment of any of these routes or different routes that are actually at the pre-pandemic levels of ridership?
Yes, and so our urban routes are coming close to the pre-pandemic, and our most popular or most ridden routes, the number 1 and the number 2, I think are at those levels already, and those are our major, arteries. And so I think that really the further away you get from downtown Burlington, probably the more the drop off has.
Why did you trade 60 years of age? I mean, I obviously could qualify for free.
Mm-hmm.
I should be paying.
I'm not sure.
Why 60 versus 65? Because a lot of people are still in the workforce.
Yes.
Until 65, some even longer. I was just wondering why 60 was selected as a group of riders to get, the discounted fare.
So I have no idea, actually. It's, the 60 was established prior to my arrival, and so I'm not sure what contributed to that, with whether it was an FTA suggestion or, Stephen, do you, anyone?
The E&D or O&D program, the federal definition is age 60 and older. So I'm imagining, since it was prior to your incarnation, that that was the basis.
That would make sense.
Consistency between the O&D demand response program and then the fares.
Which used to be elderly and disabled.
Yes.
But I don't consider 60 very old.
You can voluntarily pay.
I guess I could pay, but
I'm there, Senator, I know what you mean.
well, when we look at wealth distribution,
Yes.
this idea that somehow if you're over 60, you have a great deal of wealth, in fact, with older populations. And so, it's just who's paying and who's benefiting.
Yes.
If you're looking at who has the capacity to pay,
Yes.
just being older doesn't necessarily mean you don't have that capacity. In fact, on whole, you have more, but yes, so.
I would just say, people who are over 60 and have means are probably not riding the bus.
Yeah.
The people who are on the bus over age 60 probably need the assistance.
Well, I can,
We're hoping to change.
yeah, we are, right.
And I do want to, I'm not going to have the focus of the testimony today be on the safety and security of our system, but I can tell you when we think of
computers, data you mean, or of the bus?
Of the bus system. And so I think that one of the things that I'll be back here talking to you about later in the session is that if we are serious about having more choice riders, and by that I mean that transit is something that they choose to do, that we're going to have to overcome the safety concerns that exist. And I'm sure all of you know about the challenges that are happening in downtown Burlington. It's not isolated there. It's you can hear from Jim and the other transit agency directors about the challenges that they're facing. But to me, the single largest barrier for getting people on the bus is the perception that it's not safe, and
Personal safety.
personal safety.
And more like while you're waiting than when you're on the bus.
Both. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you keep in mind, if you're on a bus, you're trapped, until it'll stop. And so if things are happening around you that you don't like, that's not a good feeling. And certainly what you'll have is that, the unfortunate reality that we see at both the transit centers and downtown Burlington and in Montpelier is that the public bathrooms then make them essentially a sort of a day station for people who need warmth and a restroom. Unfortunately, especially in Burlington, our bathrooms are used primarily as a safe injection site, if we're being totally frank.
Yeah.
And that really discourages people from using the service if they don't have to.
All right, well, I guess that's an explanation of 60.
That tracks with my experience. I ask UVM students why they don't take the bus, and everything you just said echoes with their
Safety issue?
My question, do you anticipate in your expectation to reinstitute fares, is that going to alter the safety of the buses themselves because it will be harder for somebody to just hop on, so to speak?
Well, I think that it definitely will be interesting how that plays out. We actually get almost as much feedback from the community asking us to return to fares because the community feels that, or some of those people that are reaching out to us feel that the return to fares will improve, who's on the bus from their perspective. The reality is I'm not sure because it's still going to be a pretty cost-effective place to stay warm, during winter months.
And so just to reiterate, this is only on the urban route, so you'll still be free everywhere else.
That's correct, yes.
And can you just say something about that decision?
Well, I think that it's a decision that has been collectively made by V-Trans and the other transit agencies. And there's a different funding model for rural transit as opposed to urban transit. And so I think that up until this point, it has made sense to, be a zero fare. I know that zero fare is sort of part of the DNA of some of the transit agencies, that they've never had fares, don't ever plan to. I can tell you that you heard a little bit this morning about some of the challenges that, we're facing with long-term financial situations. And at some point in time, GMT may need to consider whether fares are going to need to return to rural. And I think that our experience the next few months will perhaps drive that. If we see that we're able to return to fare service with limited impact on ridership, maybe some potential improvements to service because of the return to fares, I wouldn't be surprised if we would come to the decision that we would want to do that also in our rural areas.
Okay. My other question is on data protection. So you're collecting a bunch of data from these riders, and you mentioned something about the employers being able to see what their employees are doing. So is that, are you giving that data to the employers, or what are you doing with all this data you're collecting of the riders?
So we're not actually collecting the data. Genfair, which is the company that produces both the hardware and has the cloud software system that is holding all of this, is the ones who are protecting the data. And my understanding is what the employers will see is essentially how much the people in their portal have used it, so that they can then provide whatever the amount is. But I don't think that they're going to be able to sort of big brother and see like, oh, employee X got on this stop at this time, and
that would be a concern.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you.
We won't bug you about other things that we might want to talk to you about some other time.
I love to hear my own voice, so anytime you want me to talk, you just let me know.
So committee, do you guys want to take a break? Yeah, why don't we go to,
Because we're not until 2:30, right?
yeah, well, we don't want to wait all the way to then, so you want to just take like a 10-minute break? 5 after, is that okay with you, Ralph? Okay, so we'll go offline and come back